a pencil factory. I'm a worker in that pencil factory. You can have all the machinery, you can buy all the raw materials you want, but without me, and presumably many others like me, to assemble the pencils, all you would have is a pile of wood, yellow paint, graphite, rubber, and aluminum.
Okay.
That would be worth, and that is worth less than the pencil when you try and sell it. And yet, all of that value added by labor, apart from the wages that you give me, which if we're being honest, there is a major power imbalance in our ability to negotiate that.
If all that putting the pencil together requires is basic use of your prefrontal cortex, then yes, your labor is alienable at lower rates than if you are a doctor. That's not the fault of the person who owns the machinery.
But if you didn't have workers like me and your pencil factory, and you were just one man.
But I have millions of people who are willing to do that voluntarily for me.
If you're just one person trying to assemble pencils, you're not going to get very far. You need workers. Capital needs labor infinitely more than labor needs capital. That's why you have worker cooperatives where the workers are the ones...
I fundamentally disagree on the distinction between capital and labor. Capital is just a term for money. If you're talking about money, money does not grow from the ground. Money only has value because it was traded for labor at one point or the products of labor. So if I take my money and I buy machinery, I have invested my labor in doing that because I didn't get the money from nowhere. Even if I got it from my parents didn't get the money from nowhere. The people who built the machines required me to trade something of value to them in order for me to obtain the machines. The people who invented the machines required people to pay them in order to get the patent to that machine so they could build the machine. The problem that I'm seeing in what you're saying is you have still failed. If what you're talking about is a system of voluntarism, you still have not named any area in which we disagree, and yet you're telling me that you're a socialist and I'm a free marketer. So one of us has got this wildly wrong, and I'm pretty sure it's not me.
The differentiation I draw, and I'm not alone in this, I'm not one person trying to redefine anything. The differentiation I and many others like me draw between socialism and capitalism is that under capitalism, when you as the owner of the factory, you give me a wage. The wage could be $7.25, it could be $15, it could be whatever an hour. Right? But you give me a wage. All the additional profit above made from selling the pencils or whatever good you produce above what is reinvested into the company ultimately goes to you or the investors, those who own shares in the means of production.
Right.
Under socialism, those people are the workers, and the example I give, again, is cooperative enterprise.
No, those are the people who are investing the risk. So if they carry the risk, then they get the benefit. The owner of the factory carries the risk, therefore he gets the benefit. The workers in the company you mentioned, if that company were to go bankrupt, they would carry the risk as well as the benefit. If the company goes bankrupt, and this guy has to pay off all of his debts, the worker may lose his job, but he's not the one who's going to incur the debt of having gone bankrupt. If you incur risk, then you're the one who pays the downside. The worker does not pay the downside. Okay, it is the investor who pays the downside, who invested in all the machinery, who sunk millions of dollars into making your labor productive. Because guess what? Your labor is without that machinery. Gunk. Nothing. You don't have a pencil to put together. You don't got the wood. You don't got the paint. You don't got the rubber. You don't got the metal. You got nothing. Right? You're sitting there, standing outside, twiddling your thumbs. It required somebody to invest. Who do you think put more in? The guy who spent millions of dollars buying all the machinery, leasing the place, making sure there was a management structure, doing the LLC formation, making sure all the tax code was in compliance, or you standing outside because you can stick a piece of graphite into a piece of wood?
In response to an article you wrote about healthcare and armchairs.
Yes.
And my first
this one, the left hated this one. Oh, yeah.
I was not a fan either. But
good. I'm glad you came in.
Yeah, thank you. So I was wondering, you said that if you had to go find a cheap X-ray or a cheap armchair, you would go to find an armchair.
If your life depended on, you have to find a chair today and buy it now.
Yes.
Versus you have to find an X-ray and buy it now. You would buy the armchair, yes.
Yeah. So my question is, part of what allows you to find a cheap armchair is that there's such a difference in quality.
Yes.
You know, you can go and buy a chair that's $5, probably going to break soon. But
Yep.
So with healthcare,
which I said in the piece, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with healthcare, if it's something you don't really want to go like some guy who's offering a $5 X-ray and say, hey, you want an X-ray? You know,
why?
So, because if your life depended on it, I don't think that it would be a situation where you'd be willing to risk the.
So let me ask you this: why should an X-ray cost $200, $1,000 through an insurance company? It's literally a machine. An X-ray technician takes a picture of it and then sends it to a radiologist who actually looks at it. Right, or a doctor looks at it.
So I don't know enough about the healthcare industry to answer that. But
the reason I'm saying this is because what I'm saying is that one of the reasons these things are so much more expensive and so much less competitive is because you do not actually have a free market in healthcare. You have a heavily, heavily regulated market in healthcare. If you want cheap X-rays, you have to have a competition in the X-ray business. There is no competition in the X-ray business. You can't go and look up a list of X-ray companies that are going to give you an X-ray today and then call them for the lowest price. In fact, if you go into the doctor right now and you say, I want you to take a look at this x-ray, how much will it cost me? The doctor will tell you, I can't give you that answer. Right? The doctor will tell you, I'm going to have to talk to your insurance company, or maybe I'm going to have to run it through my system, and then I'll get back to you. Is there any other product in America where if you went into a restaurant and you said, how much is that cup of coffee? They said, drink the cup of coffee, we'll tell you later. Right? It's not a free market. The point that I was making with the armchair comparison is not, of course, that armchairs are morally equivalent to healthcare. Obviously, people need healthcare more. Okay? Perhaps a better comparison would have been bread, right? Because people need bread. Okay? But the reason that bread is cheap is because there's a free market in bread, not because government is subsidizing bread. So the point that I was making is if you actually want to increase supply, the point I was making in that column, and overall about this, is that healthcare is not a right. Healthcare is a commodity. And the difference between those two views is that if you think healthcare is a right, now you're going to use the government to cram down on doctors that they must serve you at a particular price, or cram down on taxpayers that they have to pay for a certain level of your care, or cram down on insurance companies that they can't be insurance companies anymore. They have to be health coverage institutes, essentially, which is when they say that you have to accept pre-existing conditions, it's not an insurance company anymore. If you had a fire insurance company and they said you have to accept pre-existing conditions, it would just be called the piggy bank. Right? You'd burn down your house and then go get fire insurance. So insurance companies don't work that way. So the point I was making is if you view it as a commodity, you're going to end up making it cheaper, more plentiful, more available, more competition. And the case in point of this is LASIK eye surgery, which is really unregulated. So LASIK eye surgery used to cost like $20,000 an eye. Now it costs $3,000, $4,000 an eye. The reason for that is because the insurance companies won't cover it, and because there's a competitive market, because it's really expensive, right? So lots of doctors now want to be optometrists or ophthalmologists and do this sort of work. This is why my wife's a doctor, so I'm very passionate about this particular topic. They call it the road, which is the successful doctors, radiologists, ophthalmologists, anesthesiologists, dermatologists. All those people basically charge cash and don't work through insurance companies. Right? The vast majority of them work in high-level private industry, and that's, if you want to make a lot of money, that's what you do. And so what you're getting is in medical schools, if you're aiming for lots of money, you go into one of those four. You're not a primary care physician. You're one of those four. If you want more primary care physicians, what should you do? You should incentivize it. What Bernie Sanders and the rest of this crew want to do, they declare it a right, and then they take away the incentive. They declare it a right for you to have health care, and then they say to the doctor, you're going to work, and you're going to like it, and we're going to make you work. And this is why there's a black market in health care in Canada. There's a black market in Israel. There's a black market in the UK. It's why people come here from all of those places to get their surgeries. So here's the reality about socialized health care. Socialized health care is good for very, very basic things, right? It's like emergency care. The same way if you walk into an emergency room today and you need an x-ray, they'll give it to you regardless of whether you have insurance, which is true. This is why in California you have a major problem with illegal immigrants who don't actually have health care coverage walking in and to the ER and using it as their health care coverage. Basically, socialized medicine works the same way, except there is no upper echelon. They've made it equal at the expense of the upper echelon. Meaning that if you now want a surgery, you got to wait 6 months online for it because we didn't give any incentive for people to become surgeons. Right? There's no cost-benefit analysis there. If you want more of something, you have to incentivize that thing. And when you take away the market, there's no incentive anymore. That's the answer as to why, that's the very long answer as to why I say healthcare is more like a chair than it is like the air or water, because somebody has to provide it to you. Thanks. Yeah.
I thank you for your answer. I respect your reasoning. I also respectfully disagree. Could I just say one thing? Later this week, Sean King is coming to campus, and I think that it's really important that...
Oh, I wish he'd come today. I would love to talk to Sean King.
I would have loved to see that, but I also want to say I think it's important that, given the current reality of the situation our country is facing, that you go and listen to a multitude of speakers from a multitude, a diversity...
I agree. I think everybody should go and listen to Sean King. Yeah. And then I think Sean King should debate me.
Afternoon, Mr. Shapiro. I've seen the Daily Wire for 4 months now, and I agree with a lot of your positions.
Oh, thank you.
I am a full-time student, and I also work in a pharmacy. Mm-hmm. And it's relatively the beginning of the year right now, and for those who are in the middle class, that means deductibles and premiums.
Yes.
Now, the EpiPen, for example, back in 2006, 2007, was around $90. Mm-hmm. Now we look at the price of the same drug, not made out of gold, although ironically it is yellow. Now costs $595.
Yes.
In light of yesterday's debate with Mr. Sanders and Mr. Cruz, how how should we take care of these insanely huge deductibles? There's people that cannot afford life-saving medication like the EpiPen, which helps with allergies. If not setting a price range, if not importing drugs from Canada.
Well, we should have drug reimportation, obviously. I mean, I think more competition in the marketplace is better. When people have a monopoly on the EpiPen, it's a problem.
And a big issue with this is that the open market has caused this patent system where any pharmaceutical company, Mylan, Perrigo, et cetera, et cetera.
No, this is a serious issue. This is a very serious issue, yeah.
What is your suggestion to resolve the growing cost of life-saving drugs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as populations grow, the period of patent exclusivity is going to have to shrink. So, patents have a certain life period that's handed. Congress has the power to license patents for a certain amount of time.
It's 20 years, but the companies can manipulate it to extend that just by changing things scientifically based, like chirality, vectors.
It has to be shortened, particularly in cases where there's really only one type of drug that can be. Some drugs obviously you can make sort of a generic competitor. It's not exactly the same, but it's really close. I mean, you know more about this than I do. But there are certain areas where there's an absolute monopoly on the type of drug, and there you have to talk about shortening the period because otherwise you're going to end up with monopolies in the market. Like that's a true monopoly. That's an actual true monopoly.
Daraprim.
Yes, and that's obviously a problem. As far as our health insurance system right now, there's two questions to be had. One is, what does the ideal health insurance system look like, or the healthcare system look like? And one is, how do we get from here to there? And those are not the same question. And I think people tend to conflate the two. So, for example, there's a lot of people right now who have pre-existing conditions. And when I say free market, people think, oh, I'm going to immediately throw them off their insurance, and that means that they're going to die in the streets because I'm saying free market. No, what I'm saying is that we've had a system where, for a very long time, there hasn't been a free market. And so what you have to do is you basically have to say to young, healthy people that you need to make good decisions now. Right? It's on you. You want to buy insurance, you buy insurance. But we're not going to apply to you the same rules we're going to apply to a 65-year-old who's been living under a bad healthcare regime for the last 40 years.
Certain drugs are inevitable, though, like EpiPen. How can you prevent having an allergy?
Right. No, I'm not saying that you can prevent having an allergy. I'm talking about health insurance now. I mean, if you want to talk about the EpiPen and how people get access to it, first of all, I think that there may be, and I think there probably, let's put it this way, there are community solutions that don't necessarily come from government. Meaning that in my community, right, in my Jewish community, people, when there's a health problem, people really put a lot of money into it to help out their friends and neighbors, which is why I talk so much about social fabric. And I say if there's no social fabric, you end up with the growth of government because somebody has to take care of the people who fall between the cracks. That used to be churches, right? Now it's the government. So on a long-term level, you want to sort of redirect it away from government and back toward those churches. For now, we're going to have to give subsidies. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, Cruz said it himself last night. Virtually everybody on the right understands. But the question is that a temporary stopgap, or is that your final solution? And I think it should be a temporary stopgap aimed toward eventually eliminating a lot of these subsidies and making people responsible for their own health insurance. Because if you're not, eventually, look, if you're not going to pay for your own child's health insurance, or if you're not going to pay for your own health insurance, then the market attends. If you don't take care of yourself and you don't pay for your own health insurance, you can't penalize people who make good decisions on behalf of people who make bad decisions. It's different for children, I think, than it is for parents, obviously.
All right, thank you. Can I shake your hand?
Sure.